You're listening to Up an Octave, a podcast by Sonivia, the podcasting agency that believes that women and non-binary people deserve to take up space in the podcasting industry because our thoughts, voices, and stories matter. Here you'll learn how to make dope podcasts that inspire, educate, convert, and most importantly, make your voice shine. I'm your host, Rue Spence, and I'm here to take podcasting up an octave. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome back to Up an Octave. Today, we are going to be talking about how to take your idea from page to podcast. So if you are somebody who struggles with ideation or actual creation of your content, this is the episode you've been waiting for. So let's dive in. So first up, the thing that you have to consider is knowing what you're going to talk about. And you may be shaking your head and going, oh my God, Rue, that's so redundant. Obviously, then good for you. But so many people come to me because they're getting hung up on this step. And so what I mean by that is that you think, oh, I love this topic. I could talk about it for hours. But then when your back is actually against the wall, you begin to struggle to actually know how to chunk up the information that you want to share. Does it make sense to do it in seasons? Does it make sense to do it in a segment? Does it make sense to put this episode out before that episode? Do people even want to hear about this thing? Are you dumbing it down enough? Are you providing information that's too niche, not niche enough? There are so many things to consider that sometimes people get themselves a little bit in the weeds, and just even ideating what your content is going to be is such a huge part of the planning process. And honestly, probably one of the biggest things that I work through, especially with my launch clients. So the way that I prefer to handle this is just to shamelessly brain dump. And if you are somebody who gets pretty self-conscious when thinking new thoughts, I know I can be, then one of my favorite strategies is to take it offline. Grab yourself a piece of printer paper and a pencil or pen and just start scribbling. Think of as many ideas in your niche that you could talk about, that you'd like to talk about, that feel good to talk about, and just lean into that. Write as many ideas as you can. Shamelessly, even if some of them are bad, you don't have to record all of them. Just get them all out onto paper. And then from that point, you will be able to hone down, fine tune, dial in, all of the above onto which episodes actually feel good to make and feel helpful to make, feel like they'll resonate with your audience. So that's one of my favorite strategies. Another one, if you're not feeling super inspired, is to head over to ChatGPT, my AI assistant, and ask it, I need 10 episode ideas for this show and this niche, give it all that information and allow it to kind of brainstorm with you. And not everything that it's going to come up with is going to be viable, but for the, ideation element, getting started with thinking those thoughts is going to allow you to have something to jump off from. So then when you've got your idea and you're actually ready to produce a podcast, this is when you're going to get a little bit more in the weeds with it. You've got this idea, maybe it's a phrase, maybe it's a bullet point, whatever that's looking like for you when you're ideating. Now is the time to actually flesh it out into an episode. And this can be hard if you're not super familiar with storytelling and how to use kind of a narrative arc, even if you're talking about something that's incredibly practical and logical, still following some sort of a story arc is going to support your audience in feeling like, they kind of know generally what to expect in a way that doesn't feel predictable, but feels comfortable and safe. And it also is going to help you, it's going to help you edit when we get to that phase, but it's also going to help you not feel like you're getting too lost in the sauce while you're recording. If you have a clear blueprint of where your episode is going to go, that's going to allow you to just kind of weave through all of those topics that you're hoping to cover without getting lost. So you've got your episode idea from the list that you've just made. Now, kind of do the exercise again and just write out everything that you can think of that you'd want to talk about within that topic. And from that point, you can start to organize that information. And, I should talk about this first because this builds on that and those kind of things. If you can organize it more clearly that way, that's going to help you to visualize how the episode is going to flow. Once you have kind of those plot points, even if it's a practical podcast, the kind of plot points or bullet points that you're going to follow, this is when it's time to do your research. And if you're doing something like true crime, there's probably going to be a poop load of research for you to do. And even if you are within your own niche, something that, for me, it's podcasting. For you, it may be health and fitness. Even if it's something that you live, eat, and breathe, there's a good chance you're still going to need to do research. Maybe it's pulling up a study date. Maybe it's looking up what something stands for that you just take for granted as it just means the acronym and I know what it does. Those kind of things, even if it's within your niche that you're super comfortable with and spend all of your time in, there's still research to do. And then once you have that research, and you've got all of your notes, then you can synthesize that into 2 categories. 1 being an outline and 2 being a script. So, pros and cons time. So for me, for this show, I use an outline. I've got some general bullet points and kind of a flow that I want things to take, but I don't script it because I want it to just sound like a conversation. Like it's just you and me hanging out in your car, dropping your kids off at school. I don't need it to sound super scripted. If you are doing paranormal story, it makes sense to have a script. If you're doing any kind of fiction, it makes sense for it to be scripted. If it's, something that is about your niche, if it's a funnel podcast like what mine is, I think that that's where just outlining makes sense. Because really, you want it to be your personality that's really coming through. And unless you are incredibly trained in acting and script reading or journalism, it's going to be incredibly hard for you to read a script as a teleprompter in real time and make it sound natural. I have had issues where I've had like a loose cable, and so I've recorded an episode and really loved how I said everything, and then realized that the audio sounded like trash, and so I basically pulled a transcript and pulled up a teleprompter and read the whole thing over again. It sounded fine. No one noticed, or at least no one told me they noticed, but I could 1000% hear the difference. So I encourage you to not lean on using a script. It can be a lot more comfortable for a lot of folk who are struggling with the improvisational aspect of podcasting, but that is another one of those podcasting muscles that you're just going to have to keep practicing and keep flexing and keep strengthening in order to get more comfortable. But I promise that you will. With your bullet points, if you do decide to go the outlining route, I definitely recommend kind of using those chunks of information that you started with when you were still kind of ideating what you wanted to talk about under the umbrella of this particular episode. Start with those bullets, and then if there's something that you really want to make sure that you're listing, if there's something that you want to reference or a study or something like that, I would make sure to put that under the bullet. Or if there's like something that I really want to say this way, that's great to have under there. But other than that, just kind of let yourself, whatever comes up, comes up. And that's the magic of editing, is that if there's something that you just really don't like how you said it, you can always retake it. You can always edit it out. There are a million options, but just let it fly, see what comes out and chances are that authenticity is going to be what's attractive to your listeners. And then, the last step before actually sitting down to record is if you need to collaborate with anyone. If you have a co-host or a guest star or someone you're interviewing on that episode, coordinating with them to make sure that they know their part. So if you have a guest that you're interviewing, have you kind of prepared them? Have you let them know how the conversation's going to flow? Have you let them know what they can expect? Maybe prepare some of the questions for them. Or if it's a co-host, do they know how they need to show up? Do they know what they need to bring to the table? Having those pre-recording conversations ahead of time is going to make sure that your actual recording process is as smooth as possible. Psst. Hi, I'm interrupting the show to tell you about something special, a chance for us to connect one-on-one. Whether you're thinking about starting a podcast and aren't quite sure where to begin, or maybe you've got a show already, but you're not sure how to grow, I want to let you know about my free consultations. Yep, that's right. Absolutely free. No strings attached, no pressure, just a chance to chat with your fairy pod mother, that's me, about turning your podcast dreams into reality. You'll walk away from our conversation with actionable steps to take, whether or not we end up working together. Think of it as a gift to you and your show as a thank you for listening to the podcast. If listening to me here isn't enough and you're ready to take the next step, let's chat. Find the link to book in the show notes. Now back to the good stuff. So this episode is a little bit of a shorty. That's really what I wanted to cover, was just kind of how to go from the ideation phase to actually then when you sit down to record. I teach the 3 P's of podcasting. There's a whole episode on it if you go back in the catalog. But I often talk about that I believe that the planning phase is the most significant. So I really wanted to break down part of what that looks like. I am switching things up a little bit on the show. I'm going to be taking the audience questions out for now and switching those over when I get them onto Instagram. That just feels a little more cozy for me right now. If you truly, truly miss that segment, let me know. Just like with your podcast, I sometimes test things out and see what feels good. And in this season, partly because we're headed towards summertime, partly because things are getting a little bit more hectic on my end with, since we've moved, my husband's new job is a little more intense than we've been accustomed to, which means that I have less time to fly solo while he has our daughter. And so I kind of have to churn out these episodes a little quicker than has been my comfy workflow. So I am moving that direction and wanted to give you a heads up. But if you do have any podcasting questions at all, even though they won't necessarily hit the air, you are welcome to shoot me an email at rue.sonivia@gmail.com, or you can slide into my DMs on Instagram at Sonivia Studios. I will be back next week to talk about empathy in podcasting. And this is an episode that's going to be really near and dear to my heart. So I hope that you'll tune in. Make sure that you have followed or subscribed to the podcast wherever you listen. And while you're there, drop me a cute little 5-star rating or a review, because just like your show, mine needs those to grow. Thank you so much for being here and helping me take podcasting up an octave.